Welcome to Boil the Frog Slowly, a radio program that goes where corporate media stops, where each week we ask the questions: are politics hazardous to your health? Are the decisions and incremental changes being made by government and industry creating health problems? What are they? Why don't you know about them? What can you do about it? Not only do we ask the questions, we furnish answers with unparalleled documentation, research, studies, and guests from around the globe with proof that unequivocally show that yes, politics are hazardous to your health, and you had better be informed before it's too late. Boil the Frog Slowly. A cute name? No. It's what's happening right now to you and me and the rest of the world as we placidly float in a slowly simmering pot of subtle changes. And those who hold the recipe to this agenda count on the fact that we won't notice the heat until we're sufficiently boiled, unable to resist. I'm Pat.
And I'm Sebastian.
And today we're stirring the pot. Thanks for joining us. Hey, Sebastian, we've got a great guest today.
Yeah, this is probably going to be one of the best. Someone who's actually attacking this issue from a legal and legislative angle.
Absolutely. Somebody that talks the talk and walks the walk, Liz Barris. She's got a huge story to tell, and I'm going to give you guys a peek. Liz had to sleep in her car for 7 months due to the wireless meter making her apartment totally uninhabitable. The utility company in California, Edison, offered to remove the meter, but for a price. $4,000 a year extra, simply to have a safe analog meter on the house. So with that, Liz organized a mass tort lawsuit against the utility companies Edison and PG&E for health effects from smart meters' smart grid. Included in the suit are 16, maybe more by now, we'll get an update on that, other plaintiffs, mostly of whom have suffered even worse health effects from their smart meters than Liz has. So there's a lot more to this story, so let's hear it from her. Welcome to the show, Liz.
Welcome, Liz.
Oh, thanks, you guys. Thanks for doing this show and trying to get the word out on this. It's just all about that. It is all about, exposing this issue and getting the word out to the public. That's the bottom line, because people just don't know, So we did sue, and those lawsuits were thrown out. It's a corrupt situation in the courts that we're dealing with on this issue. Our attorney had never seen anything like it in all of his years. He's like in his 70s, and he's been practicing law for many, many decades in Los Angeles. And, it was very disconcerting. He called me. He said, we're going to have an emergency meeting. This was on a Sunday. He said, I just got a letter. What happened was our lawsuits were, we went to court against Edison. Edison tried to put him into complex court, which is something that obviously that would benefit them, because that's what they were trying to, that's the venue that they wanted us in. We fought that tooth and nail, and we got it to stay in regular court in Los Angeles County. Okay, so this is state court, by the way, not federal. So after we won that hearing, there was no further evidence introduced and no other hearings. My lawyer showed me the trail of events. Our lawsuit was passed between 3 different judges after they ruled, and it ended up being thrown into complex court after they had already ruled it was not a complex court issue. This is after that hearing that we had prevailed on against Edison.
Wow.
And it was and he said to me, this is not a good sign. He said, this is I've never seen anything like this. And he said, this is a bad, thing for our suit, and I do not think we're going to be able to get, to win, basically. He said, there's people that don't want us to prevail on this, and that's how this happened. He said there's no other explanation for something like this other than, somebody talked to them, and so at that point he basically said that this is a no-win situation, and he didn't even want to appeal it. He said, we're going to lose, and so I've been trying to get an attorney. All right, so check this out. So I must have called, maybe 35 or 40 law firms, okay, like the biggest ones I could find all over the United States, to try to pick these lawsuits up after they were thrown out by the judge. Basically putting them into complex court is throwing them out, because there was no way I'm sorry. Wait. Let me back up a second. They put him into complex court, and then they threw them out. Okay, so the judge ruled against us after it was in complex court. There was a hearing, and the judge dismissed the lawsuits. Okay, my apologies. I left that little important part out. So I finally, after like the 40th phone call or whatever, I got a huge law firm, and the reason I got them on board was because our group had just gone to Washington, D.C. We have a national group now that's opposing smart grid and smart meters. And the reason that group was formed was because PG&E got their congressman to file a bill for them to block our lawsuits after we served them. They tried to make smart grid mandatory in the United States. So I put out a call for help, and a whole bunch of people contacted me, so we formed this national group, and we went to Washington, and we had 40 meetings, executive branch, which is FCC, FDA, all these different executive branch agencies, and chairs of committees of the, appropriate committees for this issue and for our representatives. So we actually got a huge law firm that agreed to appeal our cases. After the judge ruled against us, and he said, we're not going to be able to win on this, the judge said the Telecom Act, the FCC, and the Public Utilities Commission preempted our lawsuit for health effects because those three different organizations and legislation pieces all say that this radiation is safe.
Yeah.
So they said, sorry guys, the FCC says it's safe, the PUC says it's safe, and the Telecom Act says you can't sue, so we're going to throw your lawsuits out.
And that's at the state level, correct?
State level, yep.
Okay.
We purposely did not sue the FCC. We did not make this a federal lawsuit. Attorneys that take your cases on contingency, well, suing the FCC, there's really no money in it for them. You have to sue the utilities. That's who's going to pay you. The FCC is not going to pay you, So the president of Belgium Telecom, I don't know, I'm sure you guys know this, I don't know, but he was made ill from his own Wi-Fi in his own office. He became electrosensitive, the president of Belgium Telecom. So now, all of a sudden, Belgium is like the only country in the world because this big, huge executive from the telecom industry was made electrosensitive. It's now illegal to sell a cell phone to a child in Belgium, and it's illegal to advertise to a child in Belgium.
We've always said it's going to take some top-notch person to get sick before somebody does something about this.
It's really gross, but it's true. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that, Liz. That is big information. That's amazing.
Yeah. So, okay,
So now you got thrown out at the state level. Where did you go from there?
Okay, because of our little trip to Washington, I realized that, the FDA on their website and NIH on their website, that's National Institute of Health, and NIEH is National Institute of Environmental Health Sciences, NIEHS. So they have articles, published studies, tons of stuff on their website about wireless medical device implants interacting with other wireless things, devices or infrastructure. They have a ton of information about this. So I started going, because we actually have a plaintiff in our case, in our mass tort, who had 5 heart surgeries. He had a pacemaker and a defibrillator. He had problems with that after the smart meter went on, and he's a plaintiff in our lawsuit. So I started focusing, because most of these lawyers don't want to talk to you about biological, health effects from wireless radiation. They're like, they hang up on you practically. They're just like, there's just no way we're going to take that. So when I started talking to them about wireless device interaction with another wireless device interaction, all of a sudden I got interest. So finally we found a law firm that I made a deal with them. I said, okay, because here's the thing. There was another plaintiff with a deep brain stimulator. It was a young boy, 21 years old. His deep brain stimulator was interacting with the smart meter and got shut off also. And his mom, I think they permanently disabled it, and now he gets seizures. That thing was controlling his seizures and all that stuff. So we had this young guy. And so because we had that other plaintiff, we were able to get a huge law firm on board. Well, it turns out when I got back in touch with the mother, that kid was 6 weeks out of his statute of limitations to sue. In other words, 2 years and 6 weeks had gone by, 2 years being the limit. That guy can no longer sue for life over what has happened to him with his deep brain stimulator. because he's 6 weeks out. And once the law firm found out that this kid was 6 weeks out and wasn't going to be able to file, our older plaintiff, who's about 72, was not enough money for them to be interested in. Yeah. In fact, 10 older plaintiffs are not enough money. They don't equal one young plaintiff. 30 older plaintiffs might come near a young plaintiff's monetary value. Because we had, and then I did get other medical device implant people that were older, okay, not younger. They would not take our cases. The kid is worth about $10 million, potentially. An older plaintiff is worth maybe a few $100,000. And so you'd need maybe 30 of them to equal, I don't remember the exact math, but you'd need a lot to equal, and mind you, they only get 40% of that few $100,000. So you'd need a lot of them to come close to what a young person would get. So bottom line is I had to go start seeing a therapist because I just was so depressed about this whole situation. I actually tried to hire a private detective to see how we could find young plaintiffs with medical device implants, and it became a very, very arduous task to pull this lawsuit out. And even if we were to find one, it still didn't guarantee a law firm, but we may have been able to get them back again. But anyway, so once you find one, then you got to convince them and the parent that is the smart meter, or have them think it's a smart meter without you convincing them or whatever. So it just, and I had, a few days left to do this, and so it just became, just something that was seemingly insurmountable, and anyway, it just became, and the time the clock was ticking, and, I'd had this law firm, on board for, a little bit, and then when we finally got to the bottom of the case where this kid was 6 weeks out, and then they dropped out, and then I had very little time to go get another law firm, just not enough time,
Mm-hmm.
And
well, what was the next step from there?
The lawsuits are no longer, you can't, you have 60 days to file your appeal, and in that time I needed to have gotten a new law firm with more plaintiffs. It was just like ridiculously, it was, I hate to admit defeat, and when it's not over yet, I will never stop on this issue, ever.
Good.
Okay? Never, yeah.
We're with you on that.
Yeah, it's so important, it's so deadly, and it's so debilitating. So the bottom line is our lawsuits are pretty much over. That's the bottom line. And we are, talking about other lawsuits right now, like for the billing, the rip-off on the overbilling and the gouging and there's so many. I don't know if your listeners know the story of smart meters or not. I don't know, the 2005 Energy Policy Act says this is supposed to be a voluntary program. It clearly spells that out. They force these meters on people with no choice, no freedom of choice, and right there, and they used our tax money to do all this, by the way, and that right there is a lawsuit. That's a huge lawsuit. That could potentially, do something, if we got a law firm to sue over that. We've talked to the Department of Justice while we were in Washington, and, there's many ways to skin a cat. There may be, the Department of the Interior said that this radiation is harming wildlife and birds and foliage. So, if like a rare endangered species is going to get hurt by the radiation, that might help control it. Oh, but people, that's not an endangered species, So we might have a better angle of attack going for the endangered species rather than the person.
Well, that letter from the Department of the Interior to the FCC just recently, that was so huge because that was the first federal level acknowledgement that the radiation from cell towers is harmful to biologic creatures.
Yeah, it's really incredible, and unfortunately, the guy that wrote that letter is no longer working at the Department of the Interior.
Oh no, I was wondering about that.
Yeah, he's no longer there, but he can still speak out and stuff. And
well, we'll have to get him for an interview.
Liz, what was
I think that's an excellent idea.
What was the response when you went to Washington from the various
Well,
folks
the
that you spoke
response,
to?
the response, was different depending on who we were talking with, and we also aimed our conversation differently depending on who we were talking with. For instance, If you're dealing with someone who's the chair of a committee regarding government oversight or fraud or finance or something, you focus on that, or if you go into the thing and you start talking about the health effects and you're hitting a wall, like they just say, well, and clearly they have the industry point of view, immediately you switch focus to what they're interested in, because you just throw a dart and you're going to hit something on this issue that affects somebody, whether it's the Fourth Amendment violations, the fraud with the overbilling, the health effects. There's something for everyone in here. And with our Republican representatives and our Tea Party representatives, there's actually a huge Tea Party contingency that's incredibly interested in this issue because of the Fourth Amendment and other constitutional amendment violations, which we go over in our paper called the one on our Stop Smart Grid website. I forget the name of the paper. I actually wrote most of that paper. I don't remember the name of it, though. I'll get it before the show is over.
The legislative guide to warning labels on.
Oh no, that's
phones?
another paper I wrote a while back. We were trying to get brain cancer cell phone warning labels.
Yeah.
That bill was introduced in 6 states, and it failed to pass in all 6. And we actually passed it by a 3/4 majority vote, meaning the governor can't overrule it in Maine this year, and the industry came in and killed that bill 24 hours before it was to be enacted into law, because there's a vote to enact, which is different than a vote for the bill. It's the final vote, and they flew all these lobbyists in, and even though we had a 2/3 majority vote with the legislature in Maine, that bill was killed. People reversed their votes, and they refused to vote it to enact it into a bill, and the industry prevailed, and that was just this year in 2014.
Aren't they doing something like that, though, in Berkeley?
There's a new thing in Berkeley. Yep, there's a new bill in Berkeley, and I haven't been following it as much. I've just been too wrapped up in this smart meter thing, but there is a bill in Berkeley, and I don't know what the language is. I'm not a big proponent of SAR labeling. I feel SAR is a red herring.
Right.
Yeah, me too.
Leading, yeah.
Right.
So,
I want to make this real clear to our listeners here. This is a huge topic that we just talked about. Listeners out there, you need to understand that there's a reason you don't know there could be a possible hazard coming from your device or your children's device. And that's what Liz is talking about. That's what she tried to do in Maine. She tried to get hazard warnings put on the labels, and look at what the industry did to prevent that from happening. Now, my question to you out there in listener land, isn't it common sense that if there's some type of problem, you would want to hide it? I mean, if there's no worry about health hazards, then why are you so worried about informing people and having warnings on the labeling? So it's just kind of common sense that they're obviously trying to cover up a problem here, and that's why people out there are clueless, because they have been kept from being able to make an informed decision, and that's what this is all about. And thank you, Liz, for that effort.
Well, thanks you guys for putting the word out there,
Yeah. Can you share with our readers exactly where you went and who you presented this to?
Sure, yeah. So as I was saying, okay, so you have to kind of be flexible. I'm all about the health issue with this, but I don't care if it's the Fourth Amendment violations that'll stop this program. I'm with it, as long as we can get this program stopped.
Same here. Anything, whatever it takes.
Yeah. So, some of our meetings, I forbid people from mentioning the health issue, okay? Because I knew that was going to get zero play, and it would actually there would be a closed door to whatever came out of our mouth after that. Once we mentioned that, It's that bad with some of these. But those same people who were the closed door to the health issue were all ears when we were talking about the Fourth Amendment violations and that kind of thing. And excuse me, there is actually a great deal of support for stopping that in Congress, and that might be. That might be one of the angles that helps clamp down on this program. The Fourth Amendment, the line is drawn at the home, okay? You cannot invade the home, and that's what the smart meter does. You cannot invade the home without a warrant and stuff like that. Well, with the smart meter, the police, the NSA, any, burglar, the utilities, who are not to be trusted, okay. The first page practically on our paper talks about what happened with the PG&E rep infiltrating our little activist group and pretending to be an activist, trying to stop us. They just really play dirty. But we're actually wanting to get a bill introduced now for free nationwide opt-out. That's what we're going to be going for.
Good.
Yeah. And there's a lot of technicalities about even opting out. Well, hey, I never opted in.
Yes.
Why should I have to opt out? That's actually a legal technicality that, to my knowledge, somebody recently in California used at the PUC, the Public Utilities Commission, and they were granted a free quote-unquote opt-out because they used the language of, hey, I never opted in. I'm not opting out now. I'm not paying for anything. I'm just keeping my service. For some reason, there was like some technical, and I have more follow-up to do on that because then it gets more complicated. So, but there's all kinds of little legal sneaky technicalities that they're using against people to try to get people to pay the utilities to opt out. In California, they passed something. They're charging people like $10 now if they're using solar or something like that because they're not utilizing, the utility company's energy.
Do you know Josh Hart from Stop Smart Meters?
I do, yes.
Yeah, I just spoke with him at length yesterday. And
Good. Did he talk about that?
we talked about that. What they did to him is that he had to move to the Sierra Nevada area. And so because they're so remote, the utility company gave some of the people a leeway where they said, all right, keep your analog meter, just send in your meter reading once a month. But because he's, I guess, a quote-unquote troublemaker, they billed him a $15 a month opt-out fee, which he refuses to pay. So now he's been 6 months without power and heading into the winter now, refusing just on principle not to pay that. So you talk about the little sneaky ins and outs here.
Disgusting. I mean, it's so disgusting what they're doing. It's the only word I can use for it. Disgusting, deplorable, and they should all be jailed,
Yeah, well, we were hoping to get Ohio legislators on board with passing a bill in the Ohio Senate to give a free opt-out to Ohioans, and so far that hasn't gone anywhere. In the meantime, the PUCO, Public Utilities Commission of Ohio, is writing their own ruling, and of course that's going to fall in the favor of the utility companies, which means we'll be paying an opt-out fee.
Yeah, I mean, the PUC is the utilities. There is no difference. We had the head of Edison running our PUC, Michael Peavy, Same with the FCC when we went to Washington, by the way. We're just a microcosm of what goes on in D.C. The head of the CTIA actually runs the FCC now, Tom Wheeler.
Right.
That has got to be one of the most criminal acts ever done.
It's pretty incredible, yeah. So it's a bad situation. So anyway, back to the response from these people. So there's many ways to skin this cat, and one of them is the privacy issue. If you don't care about health effects, okay, you might care about your constitutional right to privacy in the home, And that was a very good angle to take with some of these people we met with. Now, the free opt-out, I don't care what excuse the congressman needs to get behind that, whether it's the constitutional violation or the health effects. As long as we get that, we're going to be in much better shape nationally on this issue. So that is what we're going for. And then we're also doing some other stuff with the executive branch agencies. We may be working with the FDA on the non-thermal issue. They've asked us to prepare a report for them, and so we're in the process of doing that.
There is so much unclassified military data going back to the 1950s and 60s, 70s, 80s. There's one from 1994 that's just, it's like that would be all you need in my mind to prove this is hazardous.
Yes and no. Okay, yes and no. Let's keep in mind, okay, that these agencies are run by the industry. So let's just start there. So when we're talking about, trying to get non-thermal effects in there, we're talking about trying to get the industry to cop to the fact that there's non-thermal effects in this radiation. And does your audience know about thermal, non-thermal? Thermal's heat, non-thermal's not heat, and you're only protected from cooking, baking like a potato, exploding, or catching on fire, that kind of thing. You're not protected from what our military uses on the enemy. Different frequencies, pulse modulation. It can stop. Studies show you can stop an animal's heart with one pulse. And heart attack and heart arrhythmia is one of the consistent health effects that our plaintiffs had, actually, and that many people have. So there's lots of different things. There's different power densities. These are all under the non-thermal umbrella, and that's what's being ignored right now, and that's why we have such a huge problem with the health issue on wireless radiation. So yes, military studies. Once scientists from the EPA were starting to come up with health effects from this stuff, they cut the funding, and they made sure, the universities, anybody talking, about health effects, their funding is cut. You just cut their funding, and voila, you have no problem. That's been the modus operandi for the industry for the past few decades. And now that there's, a sufficient body count, for instance, in Sweden, for brain tumors, we have epidemiology, the study of human illness, and so these epidemiology reports, not necessarily biological reports, epidemiology is what's causing the World Health Organization to, sure, they're using biological reports too, but it's the epidemiology, I think. So I feel it's the epidemiology that's swaying the World Health Organization even to put it into Class 2B, which was a really big deal because that's an industry-run organization. And then I'm told that the reason they even addressed it was because it's hard to win a lawsuit on Class 2B as opposed to Class 1, or even Class 2A.
Exactly.
So this was just an out for them, another industry move to help block lawsuits or protective legislation,
Yeah, and they're not even doing epidemiology studies.
Oh, no.
That's their way around that. They just don't do them.
Yeah.
And then whatever data comes in, they manipulate and skew like autism categories. They change the categories so it doesn't look like it's such a
it's
risk.
Really gross. Recently, there's like a CDC whistleblower that talks about that they know that autism is being caused by vaccines, and they were all, told to, there's a huge cover-up about that. I've been reading about this whistleblower now from the CDC talking about that.
I'm getting irritated by the thought that they send you home and say, yes, why don't you do some research or come back to us to talk about the thermal heating. What they're doing to you is placating you. Okay, yeah, go home and chase your tail and let's be distracted by what you're going to come up with here and lose your momentum and lose your enthusiasm and energy fooling around with something that has already been proven. The studies are done, no more studies, they already know it. And the fact that we're wasting our time talking about that is accomplishing what they were wanting to accomplish with you.
Yeah, I can't agree with, I agree, and they manipulate and control all that stuff. So it's really a beast, which is why your guys' work, getting the word out is so important. Yeah. Oh my gosh.
It really is. And things have to happen at local levels to right down to parents getting informed and then trying to go to school boards and get the Wi-Fi out of their children's school.
Yeah.
Everything it's going to have to start at local levels, but what you're doing is also attacking it at a higher level, and that's very important what you're doing. Now, when I was researching your lawsuit, I came across some information about your case getting thrown out. And what I want to know, and I'd like you to clarify for everybody listening, did it ever get thrown out at a federal level? Did you ever get the federal government to come out and say, we're not responsible for health hazards, that's the PUC's responsibility?
Well, let me throw something kind of amusing in a really dark way in there about getting someone to come out and say something. So the agency that refused to meet with us, and then I'll answer your question, I just have to throw this in here, the Department of Energy, I got Senator Feinstein, Senator Boxer, Congressman Waxman, everybody that represents me in Washington was trying to get us a meeting when our group went there with Department of Energy, okay? Because they were just they gave us a meeting and then they canceled it and they refused to meet with us. The lady gave us a meeting, the head of their health department. So finally, they directed me to their attorneys. So I got their attorneys on the line, and the attorney said to me, I got to remember this quote. It's just priceless. I was trying to get us a meeting with the Health and Safety Department of Energy that's responsible for smart meters and smart grid. Okay, that's the agency where most of the money comes from for that program. So she said, we're not responsible for health and safety. That was those were her words. And I said, okay, so the Office of Health and Safety is not responsible for health and safety. And she goes, correct. And I go, well, may I ask you then, I was very polite and everything. I said, well, what is the point of that office's existence? What is the point of them? And she was silent. She just, so it's that bad. I mean, they just point blank said that to me. The Office of Health and Safety within the Department of Energy is not responsible for health and safety.
And this is specifically in regard to smart meters?
That is a quote from their lawyer, and I was inquiring about smart meters and smart grid.
That is pretty huge. I'd say that's pretty incriminating.
It's disgusting. Yeah, like if it was legal to record conversations, I mean, that thing, I would have wished I could have recorded that.
And did they say that it fell that the safety of smart meters from the health angle that was the responsibility of the PUCs?
Oh, they didn't care who was responsible for it. They were not responsible for it.
Okay.
They wouldn't even discuss it.
Done.
Wow.
Yeah.
So basically,
there's
there's nowhere to go.
Every time you mention this to anybody, everybody points to the FCC, which is why we met with the FCC. We had 5 meetings with the FCC. That's a whole other story. But so everybody points to the FCC. Even the judge in our case points to the FCC. Okay. They all point to the FCC, so that's who we're dealing with now. We're dealing with the FCC. The FCC points to the FDA, which is why we met with the FDA. So, the FDA is supposed to be doing something about this issue. The FDA is in charge of wireless devices. They are supposed to be looking out for us, but because the FDA got into bed with Motorola like about 20-something years ago when the cell phone hit the market, the head of the Center for Devices and Radiological Health, Mace Swicord, partnered with Q Bolzano, vice president of Motorola. Cell phone went onto the market, no pre-market safety testing. Head of the FCC now, Tom Wheeler. He was the head of the CTIA who did all those studies at that time on brain cancer and genetic damage and everything on cell phone radiation, and they buried the studies. He helped just bury all the evidence. So, I don't mean to talk about this with such. It's very serious stuff, what I'm saying, okay, very serious. You can read all about this in Dr. George Carlo's book, and they need to know that Motorola did studies that showed brain cancer and all kinds of horrific effects from cell phone radiation, and they tried to wargame it, quote-unquote, literally. There's a document about wargaming these findings, and they replicated their own study. They pretty much fired 2 scientists for finding the same results. It's just real, but so what we're dealing with now is the results of all that. Now people are getting, we have people getting not just brain cancer, but electrosensitivity, which is anything is with electrosensitivity. You could have, babies that are born. It's all kinds of problems now. Genetic damage usually is permanent. Okay. So when a child is in this classroom with Wi-Fi and their girls' eggs get, exposed to wireless radiation, they could be damaging their eggs. And genetic damage is the whole line is permanently damaged. So it's not even just brain cancer anymore. It's worse than that, And people with electrosensitivity, most of your listeners, they probably... I actually did a documentary on this issue that's not been released yet. On this whole entire issue of what we're talking about. Not that I didn't believe that people were electrosensitive, but in the back of my mind, I did have a little thought, this person is a wacko. Okay? I had that thought, and it sometimes it really does, and, I would sit there in Starbucks, I would just interview, even though I interviewed somebody about Wi-Fi, I sat there in Starbucks using Wi-Fi. Okay, people are brainwashed. So my point here is that, me even talking about electrosensitivity, I don't even like to do that usually because I just feel like people will tune it out. Like, I took it seriously enough to interview people about it, but I never thought it would happen to me, of course. You never think it's going to happen to you. And just the fact that it happened to me, I'm now worse of a nut job, quote unquote, than these people that I interviewed. I'm like more electrosensitive than half the people in my film. Okay, it's like crazy. And this happened in a relatively short amount of time. Like I started this film about 8 years ago, and The electrosensitivity started probably about 3 or 4 years ago.
It was all those years in Starbucks.
Yeah, I would sit in the cafe for hours. I would write in there. I didn't think anything of it. And I also lived about a block away from a stealth cell antenna farm, which is like a whole bunch of antennas that are hidden from view.
Yeah.
Well, it's a cumulative effect, and your body just eventually hits overload.
Yeah, exactly. And so for your listeners, I would just say, hey, everybody, hardwire every single thing in your house. Don't expose yourself to something unnecessarily, because you're going to be exposed whether you like it or not. You have a smart grid infrastructure now. You've got cell towers and Wi-Fi everywhere. Soon Google is they're planning on Wi-Fiing the planet. All kinds of craziness is going on. So for your listeners, I would just hardwire everything in their house, get the smart meter off if you guys have already had a rollout, and organize. You guys have to organize about this smart grid thing. I mean, I think this is a weapon. I don't even see it as,
Thank you. That's exactly how we see it, too. Absolutely. This is an all-out attack on humanity.
Yeah, I mean, this is, okay, we're using this in Iraq. Why is it on our home?
Absolutely.
Wow.
So when you were in D.C., I'd like to go back to that conversation you had with the what was it, the Department of Health, Energy, yeah, and there was a health safety officer.
Well, they eventually just turned me on to their lawyers. They said, we're not going to talk to you anymore. We just want you to deal with our lawyers. And so that's who I spoke with.
Wow.
Yeah.
So then you're pretty much directed to the FCC, and that's the only people that you can deal with.
Well, no, we met with a lot of people. We met with HUD, Housing and Urban Development. There's a situation in Oregon. Well, anyway, people are getting their smart meters removed with no fee, okay, because it's a violation of the ADA to have it on your house if you're sensitive, or if, for ADA can cover headaches, okay, like, it has a huge wide range. So anyway, we met with HUD, Department of Justice, FDA, FCC, GSA, General Services Agency, and then Health and Human Services, chairs of committees that could do something on this issue, and we met with people's legislators. That's pretty much who we met with.
Liz, clarify something for me. I have a patient safety radio program. So you're saying the Americans with Disability Act, if somebody goes that route, they have a smart meter on their home and they want to get it removed, and you're saying just headaches can qualify for that. Explain that process. How would a normal average person who is experiencing some level of symptoms, but they don't have a doctor's note or a doctor's approval or anything, what's the process?
Okay, well, because I haven't personally gone through the whole process, I probably am not the best person to advise you, and I could hook you up with the person who got this done, but they're not finished yet with their case with HUD. So once they're done, I think you guys should interview that person.
Okay.
But I can tell you that, yes, the ADA is being used, and that it is unlawful to have this thing on your home under the ADA. If you have a disability that is affected when you're exposed to this radiation.
I can tell you, we just interviewed a gal who's barely hanging on to her job because of the Wi-Fi at work. And when she went to her MD, he, because of his own research, was totally aware of this issue. And he said he thinks the lid's going to blow off this in 2 to 5 years. But he said legally, as an MD, he's not able to diagnose her with EHS or any type of sensitivity to EMF or RF radiation. All he said was, the best I can do is say that you are allergic to something in your environment.
I question what he says, actually. I question what he says. And I do know that wireless electrosensitivity is actually recognized by the it's actually on my website. One of my websites, I have 4 sites. One of them has, I copied and pasted this and put it into the page. Electrosensitivity is recognized by an agency in our federal government, okay? It's the National Access Board, I think it is. National Access Board.
Okay.
and it's on, I could look right now. I think it might be on citizensforaradiationfreecommunity.org.
Okay.
So I'm pretty sure it's on there. It could be on peoplesinitiative.org, but I think it's the Citizens one. But the National Access Board talks about electrosensitivity in sort of the same paragraph that it talks about chemical sensitivity.
Okay.
And this is also in reference to the ADA in that same posting, and in that same article that the National Access Board wrote. So here it is, citizensforradiationfreecommunity.org under the articles page. My film that will eventually be done, we show trees getting damaged, and we have a PhD on that, a doctor who talks about that. And trees don't have psychological problems.
Right.
Exactly.
And foliage doesn't either, and birds and wildlife don't either, according to the Department of the Interior. They're getting damaged. So,
Right.
None of those have psychological problems.
And that's obvious around here. I've got trees in my yard that are almost bare already.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's obvious the trees are being stressed.
Yeah. Hey, can I request that people want to help out at the federal level, because we're going back soon? We need more states. We're missing a few states. Can I put a request for people to contact me if they'd like to help?
Yeah, we're going to wrap that up. So why don't we just say, Liz, give us a little bit more information about what we can do to stay safe, what we can do to help you, and what we can do to help humanity. Where should we go? What can we do?
Awesome. So, to stay safe, do what I suggested before, which is don't, yourself expose yourself to these things. You're getting exposed as it is, so don't make it worse by voluntarily using Wi-Fi. Just use a hardwired cord, a hardwired telephone. It's not a big deal, but you're going to be saving your DNA and your family's DNA. And by the way, when they shut the Wi-Fi off, when you do it manually at the router, it can still be on. You have to contact your carrier, your phone, your internet carrier provider, and have them do it on the computer. I actually had my router on for 2 years without knowing it after I manually turned it off.
Yep. My parents had the same thing happen to them.
Yeah. Yep, it's bad. So it's very sneaky. It's not really off. You have to actually call them and make them turn it off on their computer. Okay, so I would do that, and everybody, read as much as you can online, about this stuff, and start, demand that your children are safe. No, you can't have Wi-Fi in the classroom, and no, you can't put that cell tower, 1,500 feet from my home. That's the average cancer increase. 1,500 feet from a person's home or business is a 350% increase in cancer if you live or work near that cell tower for a period of 5 years on average. So say no and fight this. You're going to have to fight it, everybody. We're going to have to work hard and fight this and work together. And that's the other thing. Okay, so with Washington, we are going to need help with this bill. We are wanting to get a free national opt-out on smart meters. And so my email is contact@thepeoplesinitiative.org. Please contact me. We need help from, we're missing a bunch of states. I don't have them in front of me, but the more people we have, the better. We couldn't even get a meeting with certain key congressmen who chairs of big committees on this issue because we didn't have constituents for that congressman, okay? So they will not take a meeting with you if you're not their constituent. So this is why, we need a lot of different people from different places because we just don't get, and then of course you need numbers from their constituency. So it's a big, big battle, but we're going to have to start now, if we want to save ourselves. So please do reach out to me. And by the way, my phone number is 310-281-9639 in case your email doesn't go through. If you don't hear back from me, that means your email was blocked. So you can call me, and I will call you back. It's not a cell phone, so I have no caller ID. Just leave your phone number, 310-281-9639. We plan on going back to Washington on this issue in 2015 after the election and after the holidays. Excuse me. So we're beginning to prep for that now. And, and then I've got some websites. I've got a great paper that a whole bunch of us worked on it's on stopsmartgrid.org. You guys can download it and use it locally when you're trying to fight this issue. It's called Legal, Constitutional, and Human Rights Violations of Smart Meters and Smart Grid. And we're actually updating it probably this month, but it's very usable as it is right now. Yeah, we have a video about the health effects from our our ill-fated lawsuit, but I encourage others to start suing over this. There's cracks in the dam that are happening. The brain cancer lawsuits in Washington, D.C., those 29 lawsuits have been given permission by the judge to present their evidence, and so this is their 15th year in litigation, and they're moving forward. That's going to be a game changer for the industry once those suits are won. I'm sure Daphne may have gone over that with you. Did she talk about that? Or
She mainly focused on her lawsuit with the Israeli Supreme Court. Most of the interview was about that. That was pretty fascinating, too.
Yeah. Well, so there's a bunch of these lawsuits that are being won, and they're very close to the end. They've been now 15 years in litigation, and they are being given permission to present their evidence, and it's just not looking good for the industry. So let's not wait for lawsuits to be won. Let's take action now. But that is going to help. Okay, big time.
So we need to make a shout out here to attorneys. We need to get some attorneys on board with this issue.
Yeah, of course. So, attorneys, we need you. Kids going to school, please be an attorney and help us on this issue. I mean, this is like, I can see, now that I'm older, I see how the world is run, how things are run. And, I wish I was an attorney. If you're an attorney right now, you are going to make an unbelievable amount of money if you focus on this issue, okay?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, it is just a matter of time. These brain cancer lawsuits are happening. They are going to be won. That opens the door to every single other electromagnetic wireless radiation-emitting device and infrastructure out there. The industry is going to collapse from these lawsuits.
Yeah, and when that time comes...
You need to get in on it now. You need to make your money now.
Yeah, and when it collapses, look at all of the paper trails that are existing. I mean... there are so many just leading right to the sources of all these problems. So when that collapse happens, you attorneys out there, there's just endless opportunity to happen here when that time comes. So yeah, attorneys, come on, let's get going. We need you. I would say attorneys are probably the key to this issue right now.
Yeah, unfortunately, yeah. It's true. They ignore you every step of the way until they can't anymore because legally. They can't do it. And that only happens with attorneys. So, we are trying to get legislation. I'll be frank, our lawsuits did not, they failed due to corruption. But I guess that's to be expected, at one point because everything is so corrupt on this issue.
Well, that gives everyone a starting point to see what worked, what didn't work, and now you can start getting your ducks in a row before you initiate one, have everybody in the wings ready to go, and then...
Yeah. And I've even got a little thing on Stop Smart Grid about how to organize a lawsuit. I interviewed a bunch of people about what they were doing in the local communities on this issue, and one of them where I interviewed myself about how to get a lawsuit going on this issue so that other people can listen to it and basically, I asked my attorney, would you do anything differently if you were to do this again? And his answer was no. He said, this is what I would do if we were to do it all over again. Mm-hmm. He said, the reason that our back is against the wall right now is because of the unbelievable corruption in the courts. Mm-hmm. And, so we need law firms, but we need big law firms with a lot of funding that have pull with the courts, that can see this thing, take it to the FCC if they have to, the whole thing. They need to go the distance, and it may take $1 million or more dollars to do that,
Well, I tell you, Liz, I am so impressed by your 4 websites and what you just mentioned there on your stopsmartgrid.org site. I mean, Pat, how many other sites do you know where you have instructions how to get a lawsuit going? It's just fantastic.
Right, and that's what you need. So we so appreciate having you on the show today.
Well, thank you so much for having me, and thank you so much for doing this show. People like you are getting the word out, and that's the only thing that's going to change this.
Yes, it is. Can you tell our listeners what your 4 websites are?
Yeah, sure. Well, stopsmartgrid.org has that paper you can use locally, and it's got some audio stuff you can listen to about how to get a lawsuit going on this, and some other good interviews on there. And then citizensforradiationfreecommunity.org, with FOR, not the letter 4. That has the video about our health effects lawsuit, and it's also got the stuff we were talking about with the ADA and stuff like that. The peoplesinitiative.org has a big smattering of lots of different things, Wi-Fi and all kinds of stuff on this issue, and even other issues, chemtrails. We have a chemtrail film on there. But American Association for Cell Phone Safety.org, that's the site that we did the legislation for the 6 states that picked up the cell phone warning label bill. So if anybody's out there wants to do a cell phone warning label bill, feel free to get in touch, and I'm sure I can help you as much as I possibly can while I'm doing this other smart grid stuff, and I can hook you up with legislators that could help you and things like that.
That's huge. I don't know anyone else in the U.S. that is doing what you're doing.
Well, thank you.
Well, thank you for joining us on Boil the Frog Slowly Radio. Please come back next week, and for more information, go to the website boilthefrogradio.com. And until next week, remember to practice safe phone.
Boil the frog slowly, you're a frog in a pot. Turn up the heat and things will get hot. Will you jump out or will you burn? Listen to the show and you will return to Boil the Frog Slowly.